My wife cheated and opened our marriage without telling me. I filed for divorce and started over. I was at the Hilton Hotel in downtown Albany, near the Capitol. It was 9 p.m. on a Thursday, and I was there not as a guest, but to find my wife. She was there with her boyfriend. She didn't know I knew, but I did. I'd known for a while, and it ate at me daily. I had to act. I thought long and hard about what to do. I tolerated her affair for months, hoping it would end. It didn't. Diana kept seeing Darren Ranger while pretending to be a loyal wife. Our talks about future plans were lies. I wondered what I did wrong, why she turned to another man. Clearly, I wasn't enough for her anymore. I tried to let her have her fun, hoping she'd come back to me, but once she tasted life with other men, she wouldn't return. After months with no change, I decided to end it. It took time to accept this. I worked long hours, often 18-hour days. Was this why she sought another man? Was I neglecting her? I didn't think so, but something was wrong. Why didn't she talk to me? If I wasn't meeting her needs, why not just leave? Instead, she kept a boyfriend and lied, saying she loved me. Why not end it maturely with a divorce? Too many questions, not enough answers. I devised a plan, not perfect, but one I could live with. I wasn't there to be violent, it wasn't worth it. I wouldn't punch her boyfriend. My lawyer warned against it. I'd end up in jail. No, I was there to end our relationship and maybe give her a moment of misery. You want to know about me? I'm David Walters, 31, born and raised in Albany. I'm an emergency room physician. I used to work at the main hospital. I have a mother, father, and brother nearby. I also have a wife. I recently took a leave of absence to recover from burnout. My own doctor advised it. I haven't told my wife because she doesn't care. I needed rest, especially after discovering her affair. My wife is Diane Walters, nee Stapleton. She's 30 and works for a national bank. We live in a nice 2-bedroom apartment near the hospital. No kids, thank goodness. Diane is 5'8" with long brunette hair and very attractive. She catches men's attention easily. We met at university in an English class. I liked her from the start. I asked her out, and we were together until today. After university, we lived together for almost 2 years and married after I finished medical school. I avoided huge debts, thanks to my parents' help. I worked hard every summer to earn money. My family is doing well. My father runs a successful construction business with over 100 employees. I work for him in the summers to pay for tuition. I know hard work. Now, I work 18-hour hospital shifts, and I'm on call on my days off, but you don't care about that. You want to know what's happening at the Hilton with my wife? Well, it's about to unfold. I've known about her boyfriend for a while now. Why haven't I acted? It's a fair question. I went through stages of grieving my marriage before deciding. At first, I was shocked Diane was cheating. I thought we were a team with shared dreams and plans. We even talked about having kids and looked at houses in the suburbs. We opened a savings account for a down payment and baby expenses. My salary as an ER doctor was growing rapidly, and Diane earned well at the bank. We were financially stable, with a bright future. I discovered Diane's affair by accident. A nurse from the ER saw her with Darren at a restaurant. Diane and Darren had been seeing each other for almost 2 years, and when I found out, I was devastated. I watched them enter the hotel and head for the elevators. They went to the 12th floor. I sat and reviewed my plan, knowing I needed to address this disrespect. I went to the front desk and asked to call Darren Ranger's room. Darren is a local business owner, with a wife and 2 sons. He was having an affair with my wife, who was his loan officer. When I found out, I couldn't believe the extent of her infidelity. A nurse at work mentioned seeing Diane and Darren together. The cat was out of the bag. A few days later, I casually mentioned to Diane that Rhonda, the nurse, who saw her at a restaurant with a friend. Diane's face went pale but recovered quickly. The following week, I talked to my father about what to do. He was shocked and disappointed. We came up with a basic plan to protect myself. I also spoke with my supervisor at the hospital. She agreed I needed a vacation to deal with the situation. I even met with the in-house psychiatrist, who recommended time off to recuperate. My next step was to hire an investigative agency to find out what Diana was up to. Within a week, they had a clear picture of her and Darren Ranger's activities, including the hotels they frequented. A discreet bribe to a hotel clerk revealed that Darren had been renting a room almost weekly for the past 2 years, often with the same woman, Diane. I then withdrew all the money I could from my bank account and prepared to confront the situation. I knew Diane would meet Darren after work, thinking I was on a long shift. As soon as she left, I packed my essentials, loaded my bike, and arranged for my dad to pick up my car later. I packed lightly for the road, just clothes, a toothbrush, rain gear, and an iPad. My bike, a 2016 Honda Africa Twin, was equipped for long-distance travel. My plan was to tour North America, avoiding freeways and staying in small hotels and bed and breakfasts. I mapped out a route through New England, Canada, and across the US, hoping this journey would help me move on. Before leaving, I had to deal with Diane and her affair. I approached the hotel desk and asked to speak to Darren Ranger. The clerk called his room, and I took the phone. "May I speak to Diane Walters, please?" I asked. "There's no one here by that name," Darren replied, faltering. "Just tell her there's been a pass away in her family. Tell her David Walters died today," I said firmly. I hung up, handed the phone back to the wide-eyed receptionist, smiled, and left the hotel. Outside, I waited on my motorcycle. Diana soon ran out, not seeing me, and got into a cab, likely heading to our apartment, now hers. I, on the other hand, was heading toward freedom. Oh my God, someone called Darren saying David was dead. I needed to get home right away. I dressed quickly, ran to the elevator, and grabbed a cab. Once home, I rushed to our apartment, struggled with the key, and searched for David. He wasn't there. Catching my breath, I saw an envelope with my name on it. Inside was a note and David's wedding ring. He knew. I read the note. Diana, consider me dead. Our marriage has been dead for a long time. I took what I wanted. The rest is yours. I told the management company I'm no longer living here. You can decide whether to stay or move. Don't look for me. I'm taking a break from work, life, and your affair with Darren. You're no longer interested in being married to me. Enjoy your life. David. My attorney will contact you soon with further information. What am I going to do now? I never thought David would find out about Darren. Our affair was just for fun. David worked so hard and we had little closeness. I was lonely and thought we could still be a normal family one day, but that plan is ruined. Darren was charming, and it was easy to get infatuated with him. I thought seeing him once or twice a week wouldn't affect my marriage. I tried calling David, but his number was disconnected. I called his parents. His father told me David had left and to go to hell. Looking around the apartment, I saw most of David's things were gone. His closet was empty, and a few books were missing. There were black garbage bags in the kitchen filled with items he left behind. I was devastated. I decided to visit his family the next day to understand what I'd gotten into. I called his friends, but they hadn't seen him in weeks. No one answered at his brother's house. Frustrated, I poured a glass of wine and sat at the table, staring at the note and wedding ring. I knew I had screwed up big time and that fixing this would be painful. That first night, I didn't travel far. Around 10 p.m., I saw my wife run out of the Hilton Hotel and into a cab. She thought I was working in the ER and would be there until tomorrow, giving her plenty of time with her boyfriend before coming home. I started my bike, an Africa Twin with a 6-speed automatic transmission, perfect for long rides with minimal fatigue. I'm always careful when I ride, staying aware of my surroundings. I've seen too many accidents in the ER caused by reckless riding. I've witnessed kids become homicidal because of their actions on motorcycles. My destination was close by, the Holiday Inn Express east of the river. Exhausted, both physically and mentally, I checked in, eager for a meal, a hot shower, and a good night's sleep. This hotel marked the end of my marriage and the start of my new adventure. How fitting and ironic. I left the apartment early and drove to David's parents' house. Seeing David's car in front of the garage, I hoped he was there. Miriam, his mother, answered the door, saw me, and immediately slammed it shut. I rang the doorbell repeatedly until John, David's father, answered. "What the hell do you want?" he demanded. "Please, John, I need to talk to David. Just ask him to come out," I pleaded. "You're too late. He left Albany last night. I don't know where he is, and even if I did, I wouldn't tell you. John, I need to explain everything to him. We can work through this," I insisted. "You've had an affair and expect him to forgive you? Get off my doorstep," he said, slamming the door. I sat on the step, unsure what to do. I rang the doorbell again and begged John to tell David to call me, but he closed the door without another word. Returning to the apartment, I found a letter from David's attorney. It stated I had been dropped from his health insurance, our financial assets were divided, and his life insurance beneficiaries were now his parents. The letter advised any correspondence to David should go through his attorney. Under New York law, I could sue for divorce after a year of abandonment. Realizing my marriage was over, I spent the weekend trying to contact David's family, friends, and co-workers, even going to the hospital. An ER nurse, Rhonda, said she had seen me with Darren and told David everything. She offered me a drink and shared what little she knew about Darren. She mentioned that everyone knew David wouldn't return to work for a while. I left, knowing I had ruined my marriage and had to face the consequences. Newfoundland is a stunning province, with beautiful scenery and friendly people. I spent over a week exploring the island, enjoying the views, the locals, and the food. On the Avalon Peninsula, I encountered a moose on the road, managing to avoid it. I'd been warned about the moose, so I only drove during the day. In Petty Harbor, after visiting Cape Spear, I got a flat tire. 4 people offered to help, which never happens in Albany. The Canadian Auto Club CAA sent a truck to take my bike to a repair shop in St. John's. While my bike was being fixed, I stayed at a small hotel in the city, which was a great place to rest, do laundry, and recharge. The hotel was clean and had a small bar and restaurant. At the repair shop, I met Emma Pfizer, a German woman traveling across the country on a motorcycle, heading to Morocco. We talked about our travels and agreed to have dinner at a restaurant called the Salty Cod. We had a great time, and the next morning, I woke up with her beside me. She was stunning, and I felt amazing for the first time in a long while. We spent the next day together discussing our travel plans. Emma had already traveled 40,000 miles and planned to drive around the coast of Africa. Her journey seemed more exciting than mine. I even called my parents to discuss changing my plans to go to Africa. They supported my decision, saying I should do what makes me happy. When I was a kid, my father used to say that fathers are where their children's dreams go to die. I didn't understand it until I grew up and realized it was a humorous yet sadly realistic saying. I have an older brother, Paul, who works with our dad in the construction company. He's married with 3 kids, and his wife, Marcy, stays home to raise them. My parents adore her, and their children are spoiled by their grandparents. But I digress. Let's get back to my plan. The next night, I asked Emma if she wanted company on her journey through Africa. I didn't know if she had a partner, but decided to ask anyway. She smiled and said, "Are you saying you want to come to Africa?" I replied, "Yes, I think Africa might be more interesting than traveling North America. It's out of my comfort zone, but I need a challenge and distance from my old life." Emma pointed out the immediate problem of getting my motorcycle to Africa. I called the store, and after some quick arrangements, they confirmed they could ship my bike the next morning if I signed the paperwork immediately. The logistics were simple but required money. 2 days later, I flew from St. John's to Toronto with Emma, then to Paris, Lisbon, and finally Casablanca. When David expressed interest in joining me on the African leg of my trip, I wanted to learn more about him. I called a friend in Berlin whose husband works for the German police. She asked him to check on David Walters from Albany, New York. She quickly confirmed that David was legitimate. He worked as an ER physician at Albany General Hospital and was on sabbatical for 3 to 6 months. He came from a prominent Albany family and was recently divorced after his wife had an affair. He graduated at the top of his medical school class and had no children. I even received a picture of him to confirm it was the same David Walters. Knowing this, I felt good about traveling with David. Having a doctor along was reassuring in case of any medical issues. However, I also understood he was likely suffering from his wife's betrayal, prompting his long solo trip. I had ended a relationship myself after discovering my partner's infidelity, so I empathized with him. Traveling alone has its perks, like going wherever and whenever you want, but it can be lonely. I've been on this journey for months and covered over 30,000 miles. I plan to write a book about my experiences as a solo female motorcycle traveler, complete with photos, videos, and a detailed diary. A friend suggested I share some videos online, perhaps on YouTube. David has a lot to learn about long-distance motorcycle travel, starting with proper gear. I called a motorcycle store in Casablanca that has most of what he needs and knows other suppliers for the rest. It will be interesting to travel with Dr. David. I hope to be a good guide. David's parents have made it clear they want nothing to do with me. They refuse to talk or tell me where David is. It's becoming obvious that our marriage is over, but I'm unsure if I should file for divorce first. What if he comes back wanting to repair our marriage? Could he trust me again? After Darren ended things, fearing his wife suspected the affair and might hire an investigator, I felt very lonely. He was also worried David had informed his wife about us. My social life is almost non-existent, but I need to get out and see people. I plan to start joining my KO workers for Friday meetups after work. Staying inside my apartment is suffocating. I need a change of scenery. Almost 2 months have passed with no word from David. It's clear he wants to end things. What did I do so wrong? He was never there for me, always prioritizing the hospital. I needed him too. I love him, but our conflicting schedules left us little time together. I have needs as well. Darren visited me at the bank yesterday. He thinks his wife is no longer suspicious and wants to resume our affair, suggesting we use my apartment to save on hotel bills. I need closeness soon, or I'll go crazy. I hoped it would be David, but without him, I might have to settle for Darren. Damn it. Casablanca is an amazing place, known as Al Dar Al Bida in Arabic. It's Morocco's main port on the North African Atlantic coast with a population of about 4 million. The city blends the old with the modern. While waiting for our bikes to arrive, Emma and I stayed in an inexpensive hotel. We toured the city, bought gear, enjoyed local food, and learned about its history and culture. Due to bad weather, the ship was delayed by 2 days, so we stayed in Casablanca for 8 nights. Some of those nights were the best of my life, and the rest were just as enjoyable. Morocco's beauty is incredible, and so is Emma's. The more I learn about her, the more I like her. She's not only physically beautiful, but also smart, resourceful, and a great motorcycle rider. She has tons of common sense and isn't afraid to use it. Emma taught me a lot about adventure riding. She has a longtime boyfriend, referred to as her common-law husband, but he left her for another woman, and she moved on with her life. In Casablanca, I bought essential equipment, gasoline, oil, tools, extra LED headlights, a GPS system, top-quality riding gear, a sleeping bag, an inflatable pillow, and a small gas stove. We planned to stay in bed and breakfast inns and eat local food. Adapting to the local diet was challenging at first, but I got through it with Emma's support. I received a letter from my attorney saying Diane hadn't contacted me. I didn't care about her anymore. She was supposed to be having fun with another man and pretending to care about me. What a load of crap. After Casablanca, we rode to Marrakesh via El Hadida and Essaouira. The indirect route offered a great ride and beautiful scenery. Emma, who speaks German, English, French, Spanish, and some Arabic, was invaluable. The journey to Marrakesh took 5 days and over 1,300 kilometers. It was the best trip of my life. Marrakesh, with about 1 million people, blends old and new. We decided to stay for 3 days to explore. We found an inexpensive hotel with secure parking for our bikes, including Emma's well-equipped BMW F800 GS. My Africa twin performed well, and we enjoyed every moment of our adventure. Africa is unlike anything I grew up with. The culture, language, terrain, food, and weather are all different, yet it feels similar to home. People here want the same things: to care for their families, have food and shelter, and ensure a better life for their children. They seek peace and security, though not all countries on this continent have stable governments. Morocco, fortunately, is better off than many. Traveling with Emma has been educational. She thrives on adventure and challenges. Meanwhile, I'm learning to face my own fears of new places and environments. I grew up in safe New York, with a stable family and a cozy home. Not everyone has that luxury. My sabbatical has taught me that people everywhere rely on their families and friends and take pride in their homes, no matter how humble. Traveling is a learning experience, opening my eyes in ways I never imagined. Emma is a wonderful companion and lover, passionate, caring, and adventurous, yet full of common sense. I'm filled with a lust for Emma, travel, and a new way of life. I don't think I can return to my old lifestyle in Albany. I really enjoy traveling with Dr. David in Africa. He's a pleasure to be around and constantly amazed by the differences between Africa and the US. He has always worked hard to do the right things: university, medical school, family, and marriage. Yet his wife let him down, failing to support him in his profession and their shared choices. I don't know her and don't aim to take her husband, but it seems she did a good job of leaving him on her own. Though we've only been together a few weeks, I can tell that if things continue as they are, it will be hard to part ways when he returns to work. I have a plan to complete my adventure and write a guidebook for women who want to travel the world on a motorcycle. I committed to this project before starting my journey and want to see it through. I doubt it will be very profitable, but I enjoy it and believe I'm good at it. We are traveling from Marrakesh to Laayoune, about 900 kilometers, mostly along the coast. The vast, dusty landscape is breathtaking. As a novice, I have to respect the environment and stay alert. My American passport isn't as recognized here as in EU1. Border guards often wonder why an American is riding a motorcycle in such remote areas. One customs officer asked why I left America. I pointed to Emma, and he laughed, understanding immediately. On our way to Laayoune, we camped for 2 nights far from the road to avoid thieves. The first night, I hardly slept, but fatigue helped me rest better the second night. Morning coffee and ablutions made me feel much better. Gasoline, water, and food are our priorities, so we never pass a place to fuel and restock. We always pay cash to avoid drawing attention. West Africa can be as dangerous as some parts of the US, so we stay aware of our surroundings. Expensive motorcycles make us targets, and while my gear protects me from falls, it's no match for weapons. I've seen too many pistol injuries in the ER. The journey through Western Sahara and Mauritania was unlike anything I've ever experienced. Dry, dusty, brutal, and beautiful. We communicated via Bluetooth helmets, with Emma sharing fascinating insights about the region. Her nonstop talking was mesmerizing. I loved it, but it was also daunting due to its foreignness. After Laayoune, our goal was Dakar, Senegal, over 800 kilometers away, requiring 4 days of intense driving. The heat and dust were relentless. Emma constantly reminded me to drink water, and I emptied my 4-liter Camelback daily. Sometimes we had to stop to relieve ourselves, and once, I tried to take a picture of Emma squatting, which led to a hilarious chase. Traveling through Western Sahara and Mauritania was repetitive, wide-open spaces with nothing around. We carried extra fuel and had to use it a couple of times. My bike, with a bigger engine, consumed more gasoline than Emma's BMW, so I planned to get an extra gas tank. We had a breakdown and spent 3 hours fixing it on the side of the road. We camped for 3 nights, and despite not showering, being carnal with Emma was still amazing. We used a little water and soap to wash the essential parts and brushed our teeth with a cup of water each. We crossed the Senegal border at Diama, avoiding the more complicated and costly Rosso crossing. Near Diama is St. Louis, a city divided into different parts, some on islands. The contrast between poverty and wealth was striking. We found an inexpensive hotel, Hotel de la Poste, with secure bike parking and a nearby police presence, reducing crime. Emma and I rested after our desert crossing, enjoying the bed, food, hotel pool, and laundry room. Checking my email, I saw updates from my family and my lawyer. Diane had written, asking where I was and when I'd return to Albany. I instructed my parents and attorney not to disclose my whereabouts. Diane hadn't started divorce proceedings yet, but I expected she would soon. She had been having an affair for 2 years, so our marriage was over. If she didn't file for divorce, I would. I'm enjoying the best time of my life with Emma, though I don't know what the future holds for us. Meeting her was a wonderful accident. After 2 wonderful days at the hotel in St. Louis, we set out for Dakar, about 300 kilometers away. Our plans quickly changed when we encountered an overturned bus. A family on a scooter with a propane tank had hit a pothole, causing the bus to swerve and crash. David immediately ran to help the injured family, finding the father pinned under the bus, the children bleeding, and the mother unconscious, with the propane tank underneath her. David focused on the mother while I helped with the children, and others checked on the father. We used our first aid kits, but the father needed more help than we could provide. The police arrived but did little besides directing traffic. Finally, 2 ambulances arrived, and the family was taken to the hospital. David and I sat by the road drinking water while he checked on the bus passengers. A police officer asked David why he was helping, and learning he was a doctor, asked him to accompany them to the hospital to describe the family's injuries. We followed the police to a modest hospital where David stitched up the children's cuts. Despite its outdated appearance, the hospital was clean. David instructed me on how to assist him, and we worked for hours. His skills and calm under pressure were impressive. We stayed another 3 days in St. Louis, with David working over 30 hours straight at the hospital. Word spread about the visiting doctor, bringing many patients. I returned to the hotel to rest and clean up. When we finally left, we felt a bit sad, knowing the people there wouldn't have regular medical help again. Our return south brought new adventures, with a planned stop in Dakar, the capital of Senegal, home to about 4 million people. The city's contrast struck me. Wealthy areas alongside rampant poverty. Expensive Mercedes and shabby scooters shared the streets without much hostility. People were focused on survival, just like anywhere else. My experiences had opened my eyes, perhaps thanks to Diane's infidelity, which pushed me to see a new world. Every day, I was understanding Emma better. As a treat, I insisted we stay at a beach hotel, splitting the cost as usual. I sensed Emma's finances were tight, so I covered the cost this time. Needing a vacation after St. Louis, we enjoyed 3 wonderful days as tourists, relaxing on the beach. Emma said traveling with me made her happy, and I told her she was giving me a new life. Reality hit when I checked my email. The chief administrator at Albany General Hospital wrote, "David, we hope you enjoyed your leave and are ready to return. We agreed on 3 months with a possible extension to 6, but you must return by the 1st of next month due to a CO worker's illness. The emergency room needs you back. Please call me when you get this. We really need you." Well, crap, all good things come to an end. I decided to ignore the email for a few days and continue the trip, so that's what I did. The journey south was going to be tough and more dangerous, especially since David had to return to the US for work. We discussed me going back to Germany, but decided to ride further south to Namibia. From Windhoek to Cape Town. We arranged to ship our bikes from Dakar and took a memorable flight to Windhoek on an old plane with young pilots. The weather was windy, but we were glad to land and see our bikes. The trip to Cape Town took 5 days. Knowing our time together was ending, we made the most of it. The lovemaking with David was fantastic, and I fell in love with him. However, I needed to return to work, start writing my book, and edit hours of video. The publisher was eager for progress, and funds were running low. David and I flew to Frankfurt together, then parted ways. He flew to JFK in New York, and I took a train to Berlin. On our last day, we returned our bikes, mine to storage and David's to the US. It was a sad day, and David didn't want to go home. At Frankfurt Airport, we were quiet. He kissed me and whispered that he loved me, and I knew this wasn't the last time I'd see him. Back in Albany, I stood in the hotel lobby when my brother Paul called out to me. It was my second day back in the US. "Dave, you look good. Where have you been? Overseas? What's going on with Diane?" It's a long story. Paul invited me to dinner, and I agreed. It was time to get back to life at home. We chatted, and then I headed to the hospital to see my boss. Paul called Marcy to tell her I was coming for dinner. On my way, I passed the building where Diane worked. Dr. Johnson, the hospital administrator, was happy to see me and mentioned a letter from the Senegalese government thanking me for my help in St. Louis. I explained the story about the family on the scooter, and she found it strange but appreciated my effort. The ambulance chief briefed me and put me on the schedule for 12-hour shifts, starting tomorrow. Tonight, I would visit my brother, eat, play with his kids, and maybe have a few beers. I knew there would be many questions, and I was ready. Marcy hugged me tightly as I walked in. "David, how are you? We've all missed you." "I'm fine, thanks," I replied. After giving the kids some small gifts, they went off to play. Marcy then cut to the chase. "What happened between you and Diane? Why did you leave?" "Good to see you too, Marcy. A beer would be great if you have one," I said. Paul, signaling that he'd expected this, fetched 3 beers from the kitchen. Under their expectant gazes, I began. "So, you want to know what's going on with me? What did Mom and Dad tell you?" Marcy, frustrated, said nothing. I even tried talking to Diane, but she wouldn't say anything. She just wanted information from me. "So what's the story?" I spent the next half hour summarizing the past 5 months, touching on Diane's affair without delving into the investigator's report. Over dinner and more beer, I shared stories about my travels and about Emma, who was now back in Berlin while I was back in Albany. I told them I was looking for a place to stay until I sorted out my divorce and future plans. The trip with Emma had opened my eyes, and I couldn't return to pretending to be happy at the hospital. Returning to Albany reminded me of my failed marriage and how easily Diane had left me. I didn't voice this to Paul and Marcy, but thinking about Diane made me feel weak. She had deceived me for so long. I resolved never to let that happen again. I realized there are many good women in the world, honest women with integrity, who would communicate openly rather than betray. If Diane didn't want to be married, why didn't she just say so? We could have divorced and moved on, but she chose to lie. I took an Uber back to the hotel and got a good night's sleep. Tomorrow, I needed to find a place to live. A colleague informed me that David was back in town. They had seen him at the hospital. I tried calling his parents, but they gave me the usual response, "Back off." Desperate, I decided to stake out the emergency hospital entrance. Spending 4 nights watching from my car, I was surprised by how busy it was, with ambulances arriving constantly. To pass the time, I brought a book and snacks. On the second night, I needed to use the restroom, so I went inside. A security guard asked if I needed help, and I inquired about David. He said doctors' names are withheld unless you have an appointment, and directed me to the main entrance. I thanked him and left. On the 4th night, I finally saw David. He was walking from the doctor's parking lot to the entrance. My heartbeat quickened, and I almost called out to him, but he disappeared inside. At least I knew he was back. My next step was to try to talk to him and convince him to come home. After a few days of searching, I found a nice, furnished 1-bedroom apartment near the hospital. It was small but had everything I needed, so I only had to buy linens, towels, and food. The building had underground parking and security, although no doorman. I quickly got back to work in the emergency room, dealing with daily fire shot sufferers, accidents, stabbings, heart attacks, and strokes. America's obsession with obesity was evident, unlike Africans who generally had better nutrition and maintained their health due to scarce medical care. All these emergency cases and their insurance payments funded my salary. 2 weeks after returning to Albany, I met with my attorney to discuss my divorce from Diane. There wasn't much property or money to divide, and I told her Diane could keep everything in our shared apartment. Leanne had already prepared the divorce petition, and I told her to proceed. I was surprised Diane hadn't initiated the divorce, assuming she wanted to move on. Back at my apartment, I realized I needed a hobby outside of work. My motorcycle wouldn't arrive for a few months, so I decided to look for another one. After researching online, I visited 2 local KTM stores and settled on the 890 Adventure R. I added accessories for long-distance riding, making it suitable for both paved and dirt roads. It wasn't cheap, but I had nothing else to spend my money on. Here's a quick guide to divorce in New York State. You can file for a no-fault divorce if you and your spouse have lived together for at least a year, or if the marriage has irretrievably broken down for at least 6 months. My attorney emailed me saying Diane had been served with divorce papers. Leanne expected to hear from Diane's attorney within a week. If Diane stalls, Leanne would file a petition with the court, and it would be granted after a year. Diane's prolonged affair counts as an irretrievable breakdown of the marriage. If she objects, the lack of living together for the last 6 months means we would need to live apart for another 6 months to meet the requirements. Either way, the divorce would be final in about 6 months, simple and easy. Then my doorbell rang. I arrived home to find a man in a suit standing outside. As I approached, he checked his phone and asked, "Diane Walters?" "Yes. Who are you?" I replied. He handed me a large envelope. "You have been served." Before I could react, he took a picture of me holding the envelope and quickly walked to his car. "Crap," I muttered to myself. I knew this was coming. I did something I probably shouldn't have. I followed David after his shift 2 days ago to find out where he lived, just a few blocks from our old apartment. Knowing his location, I took a few days to gather the courage to approach him. I dressed in an outfit he liked, skinny jeans, high heels, and a white sleeveless blouse with my hair in a ponytail. I bought his favorite IPA beer and a bottle of California Chardonnay for myself. Taking a deep breath, I pressed the call button for his apartment. After a few rings, he answered. "Hi, David. Is that you?" I asked. "Who's this?" he responded. "It's me, Diane, your wife." Silence. "Can I come up?" I pleaded. More silence. "I'd like to talk to you." After what felt like an eternity, the buzzer sounded, and I entered. I took the elevator to his floor, and with unsteady legs, knocked on his door. I wasn't surprised when the intercom buzzed. There are always people coming to apartments, whether selling cookies, salvation, or votes. But this was unexpected. I let her in. When I heard the knock on the door, taking a deep breath, I gathered my thoughts in the few moments between her call and the knock. 100 questions and feelings ran through my head. I reminded myself that I had moved on and was in a better place now than 6 months ago. I opened the door, and there she was, looking tired but good, the woman who was still my wife. I invited her in. "Hi, Diane. What brings you here tonight?" I asked. "Hi, David. I wanted to talk to you. You've been hard to reach and even harder to find." I walked to the kitchen and saw she had a bottle of wine. I got her a wine glass and set it on the counter. She handed me the bottle, and I noticed it had a screw cap, so I poured her some. She pulled out a can of IPA beer and offered it to me, but I declined. "I'm on hospital duty tonight." I grabbed a glass of Diet Coke and pointed to the table for us to sit down. I decided it was better to have this conversation at the table rather than pretending it was a casual chat in the living room. Now was as good a time as any to finalize our marriage, sign the papers, and let our lawyers handle the rest. That crazy woman tried to kiss me on her way out of my apartment. I want nothing to do with her now. She wants us to act like nothing happened and be a couple again, even have kids. She's not right in the head. That's not going to happen. The only thing left for me is for my lawyer to file for divorce so I can move on with my life. I took a long hot shower to wash the stink off me, and then I had a beer. David got straight to the point, without any pleasantries. He looked more serious than I'd ever seen him. My stomach knotted as I started. "You scared the hell out of me when you called the hotel and had Darren tell me you were dead. He didn't recognize your voice." "I was shocked when I got home and found your note and wedding ring." I placed his gold wedding ring on the table. He just stared at it, not touching it. I tried talking to your family, but none of them wanted to speak to me. Your father repeatedly told me to go to hell. I guess I deserved it. Ever since you left, I've been in some kind of hell, I said. David replied quickly. What did you expect me to do? I found out you were having fun with Darren for a while now and you thought I wouldn't do anything about it? What kind of idiot do you take me for? Never mind, I know what kind of idiot you think I am. It wasn't like that, I protested. How the hell was it, he demanded. I was lonely. You were always at the hospital, never home, and when you were exhausted and never had time for me, I explained. So it was okay to have fun with another man? Ignore our marriage? Why couldn't you at least talk to me and say you wanted to end it? Why deceive me for so long? David stared at the table, refusing to look at me. He took a drink and then asked, Did you sign the divorce papers? No, I don't want a divorce. I want us to be a family again. I am still your wife and want to be your wife and the mother of your children, I said. David laughed. You've got to be kidding. Are you completely delusional? No, I still love you very much. I want us to be together again, I insisted. Jesus, you're delusional. I'm not going to be your husband a day longer than I have to be. My lawyer is ready to file the divorce without you. Our marriage is irretrievably broken, thanks to you. It's over. You started this by cheating and I'm just finishing it, he said. What does it take to get over a divorce and become a couple again, I pleaded. I don't want to be married to you, Diane. You broke us. We're going our separate ways. I've had an amazing experience since leaving Albany, and I'm not going back to my old life, he said firmly. David, we can be good together. I know it, I argued. No, we can't. You enjoy spreading your legs too much for other men. This water is poisoned. It's over. You can go back to doing what you like, David said, standing up. I finished my wine, stood up, and moved toward him to kiss him, hoping he'd remember what it felt like to be with me. I took his hand, pulled him to me, and kissed him on the lips. He pulled away after a second. Don't forget to take this with you, he said, pointing to his wedding ring on the table. I took it, put it in my bag, and left his apartment. That's when I realized we were done. David was over. He and I would never have a life together. I loved him and had cast him aside for something not worth the price. Darren wasn't a prize. He got what he wanted, and it cost me a husband I didn't want to lose. I was so stupid. I deserved what I got. I need to sign the papers and let him go. I've been very busy in Berlin, editing hundreds of hours of video and adding context. The dubbing has been challenging since I'm doing it in both English and German. Closed captioning is fun, but a lot of work. The past month has flown by. I sent David a few emails with short videos and pictures from his Honda in Africa. He looks good in the videos, even in the one where he threw his motorcycle. We both laughed a lot. I asked my friend whose husband works for the government to check on David before we traveled to Africa to ensure he was who he said he was. Thankfully, he was. Recently, I asked Ingrid to have her husband Nick update me on David. I needed to know what was going on without asking David directly. Nick found that David is back working in the ER and his lawyer has filed for divorce. The application was registered a few weeks ago, so he will be officially divorced soon. That's good because I have important news for him, but before I tell him, I need to take care of some things in America. I sincerely hope my news will please him. I need to tell David the news, but I'm not going to do it when he's still mad at his ex-wife. I need him to focus on me, maybe a little more time, but not much more time. Yay, I'm divorced. It's official today. I have the paper in my hand. Thank God. Now I can move on and do the things I want to do. I need to figure out a few things first. Emma calls and writes often about her book and videos. She sends videos, mostly of me doing stupid things like throwing my bike or almost running into cows because I wasn't paying attention. We both laughed a lot. I told her about my life, including Diane's visit, hoping for forgiveness and reconciliation. The disrespect Diane showed was the final straw for me. Learning about her affair sealed my decision. There was no going back. Emma listened to my rant and then said she had to go but would email me soon. She mentioned she had an announcement for me in a couple of weeks, but I'd have to wait. I figured it was about her book. A week after the divorce, I'm at Albany Airport, ready to fly to Berlin via Chicago and London. It's a 15-hour trip and I'll arrive around noon. I need to see Emma. It's been almost 2 months. I need to know if there's anything left between us. If not, I'll figure out my next steps, possibly with doctors, without borders. I landed in Berlin, went through customs, picked up my bag, and took a cab to the Parkview Hotel in Alexanderplatz. After checking in, showering, and eating, I set out to find Emma's office. Using Google Maps, I walked to her building, arriving around 4 p.m. If she didn't want to see me, I'd play tourist until my flight home. Surprisingly, her office was only a 15-minute walk away. I found her company's office in the lobby directory and took the elevator up. At the reception, a young woman greeted me in German. I asked to see Emma Pfizer. She looked surprised, made a call, and said Emma or someone else would be there shortly. She gestured to some leather chairs for me to wait. While I waited, she made another call, speaking quietly and quickly in German, and glanced at me several times. A few women passing by also looked me over. I felt scrutinized. Finally, another attractive woman approached me. Dr. Walters? Yes. Follow me, please. I realized I had introduced myself as David Walters, not Dr. Walters. They knew more about me than I thought. We walked through sleek glass and steel offices, and many women glanced my way. I discreetly checked my fly. It was zipped. I wondered if there had been an announcement about a strange American in the halls. After what felt like a long walk, I saw Emma coming around the corner, smiling. She ran to me, hugged me tightly, and kissed me on the lips. People were watching. "My goodness, David, when did you get to Berlin?" she asked. "A few hours ago. I went to the hotel to clean up before coming here. I didn't want to look like a vagrant and risk getting thrown out by security," I replied. Emma took my hand, and we headed to her editing room. She wanted to show me her work on the videos from our travels. Emma was dressed in a long black skirt and a white blouse, quite different from the motorcycle gear I was used to. She looked beautiful, but my best memories were of her undressed. I decided to go with the flow and see how things went. Over the next few hours, we talked about her book and videos. Some would be on YouTube, and most would be on the publisher's website with a subscription. "Do you have time to have dinner with me? I'd like to know what's going on with you beyond your book, and I have some things to share about my life," I said. "How long can you stay?" she asked. "I can stay for a few days. My return flight is in 3 days, but I can change it if needed." "What do you have in mind?" I wondered if she was asking me to stay longer or figuring out when to get rid of me. I was cautious. "I want you to meet my family. I've told them a lot about you, and they are looking forward to meeting you," she said. I was surprised. "Oh, I suppose I can do that, but first I need to eat and try a good German beer. I can meet you after work." "No, you won't. I'm leaving with you now. It's been months since I've seen you, and I have important news after your news," she insisted. As we walked out, people turned to watch us. On the way back to my hotel, I asked where she lived. She said she had an apartment nearby. I briefly wondered if she had a husband. The last thing I wanted was to be the other man. Traveling in Africa made it easy to hide such things, but reality hits fast at home. I realized I didn't know as much about Emma as I needed to. In my hotel room, Emma and I immediately started kissing passionately. Our clothes came off quickly, and we were undressed on the bed. I reacquainted myself with her touch, realizing how much I'd missed her. After the nightmare of my marriage, being with Emma made me feel human again. I didn't want it to end. It was almost 9 when we got up to shower and eat. We stayed at the hotel's restaurant, which had good food and beer. Emma ordered a Diet Coke, which was odd since she usually likes beer. "Why does your family want to meet me?" I asked. I told them about you and our travels in Africa. "They're eager to meet you since you're from the US. My parents have visited my aunt in Florida several times. She lives near Tampa part of the year, where it's nice, especially for her arthritis." Emma laughed. "We can visit my parents tomorrow if you want. It's a 6-hour train ride." "Where do they live?" I asked. "In Moulacker, in the south. My dad worked as an engineer at Volkswagen, developing production systems. My mom is an accountant, but both are retired now. I'll call them and let them know we're visiting." I decided to go with the flow. Emma then asked, "So, you're now officially a free man?" I smiled broadly. "Yes, and I have the paperwork to prove it." I pulled out the divorce papers. Emma examined them. "Congratulations. How does it feel?" "Good." It was inevitable after I found out she'd been with her boyfriend for almost 2 years. She didn't want to be with me. "What do you want to do now?" she asked. Her questions had a definite motive. She was taking me to meet her family, and I was being evaluated. "I'm not sure how much longer I want to stay in Albany. The hospital will pay me well, but there's too much history. I need to explore more of the world." "You've given me the travel bug," I said with a grin. Emma smiled back. We spent the night in my hotel room, and the next morning we went to Emma's apartment so she could pack. After a few phone calls, we took a cab to the train station. I liked European trains. They run on time and have less paranoid security than airports. We found our seats and settled in. When we arrived in Moulacker, we were met by a couple in their 60s. Emma looked a lot like her mother, with the same eyes and hair, but she had her father's smile. We found her father's beat-up station wagon and drove to their house. Their house was old but in excellent condition, with modern appliances. I complimented her father, Carl, saying my dad, a builder, would have approved of the work he'd done. Carl seemed pleased. I was offered a beer, and Emma got drinks for everyone. We sat down, and they immediately asked, "So, you're American? Where in America?" "Albany, New York, north of New York City, about 2.5 hours away," I replied. Emma returned with the drinks, beer for Carl and me, red wine for her mother, and ice water for herself. We sat in the living room, and as the silence grew uncomfortable under her parents' intense gazes, I started a conversation. The best way to engage people is to ask about themselves. Carl quickly began talking about Volkswagen and his work. Emma's mother, Maria, was more modest. She had worked for a large accounting firm for many years, mainly in auditing. She retired when Carl did, and they planned to travel, especially to warmer places. They wanted to buy a vacation home in Spain or Greece, somewhere warm in winter. In Germany, it's too cold for them, and they deserve a break from the cold. They have friends who do the same, so they plan to find a place nearby. My parents bought a big van to see the country and spoil their grandchildren, I said. They expected me to add to the number of grandchildren, but it didn't work out. Meanwhile, dinner was being prepared in the kitchen. Carl talked about German engineering and beer, while Emma watched me closely. Emma got into motorcycling because of me. Carl proudly mentioned, "I've owned motorcycles most of my life and still have a BMW 1200 for long-distance travel and a smaller bike for local trips. Maria often rides with me on our trips." Tomorrow, I'll show you my motorcycles, but tonight, let's enjoy dinner. I felt scrutinized like in a job interview. I expected to get a separate bedroom from Emma's, but was surprised to find fresh towels for both of us in the same room. When we got into bed, I left my underwear on. "Why are you doing that?" Emma asked, pointing at my boxers. "Because we're at your parents' house, and it doesn't feel right to get undressed here," I replied. She laughed. "They've slept undressed all their lives. Take it off. I want you close to me." I whispered, "How long?" Emma didn't move. "How long?" "Yes, how long? How much time for what?" "How many weeks?" "You remember I'm a doctor, right? I know what a pregnant woman looks like. You have a small bump, so maybe 3.5 months." "Oh my God," I connected the dots. "I'm going to be a father." Emma smiled and pulled out a plastic test with 2 blue stripes. "I saw a doctor in Berlin a month ago. I have an ultrasound appointment in a week." I was ready to move on as friends, not lovers, knowing what time and distance do to relationships. But part of me wanted to rekindle our connection. I got off the bed, grabbed something from my bag, and returned. "I brought this just in case," I said, opening a small box and pulling out a ring. "Will you marry me?" Her face lit up. "Yes, yes, yes." I hugged Emma tightly, then remembered others would want to hear the news. I quickly dressed and found her parents in the hallway. "We'll be right out." Emma dressed, and we all went to the living room to share the news. Maria already knew her daughter was pregnant. Mothers always know. Carl wasn't upset to learn his daughter was marrying an American. What can I say? We got married in Berlin with Maria, Carl, a few friends, and some colleagues from the publishing house, about 30 people in total. When I showed up at the office, word spread quickly that the American Emma had talked about was there, and they all wanted to see the doctor who rode a motorcycle. We made several decisions, including moving to Albany to be closer to my family and to give Maria and Carl a place to visit. I negotiated with the hospital for a shorter shift cycle and less pay to spend more time with my pregnant wife. The next few months were hectic. Emma's pregnancy progressed, and we found a nice 4-bedroom house near my brother's place, perfect for raising children. Marcy and Emma busied themselves with decorating and planning for our expanding family. Emma Maria Fisher Walters gave birth to beautiful twin girls, each weighing almost 6 lbs. Our lives became a whirlwind of feeding, changing diapers, and sleepless nights. Maria and my mom competed fiercely to be the best grandma, while my dad and Carl vied to outdo each other in home renovations. They had grand plans for our house, and I decided to let them run with it. Just when life seemed to have kicked me down, something good came out of it. I lost my first wife because of her infidelity, which she hid from me for a long time, leading to the end of our marriage. I felt guilty, but she chose to cheat. Meeting Emma was a chance encounter. If I hadn't gotten a flat tire in Newfoundland while eating ice cream, I probably never would have met her. Meeting her was the best thing that could have happened to me. Now I have a new life, a wonderful wife, 2 children, and a future to look forward to. This is the life I wanted. 2 days later, David and I returned to Berlin by train. We had a lot to do, and I wanted him with me at my ultrasound appointment. David spent time on the phone with his hospital and his family to share our news. His mother and father shouted over the noise of his brother, his wife, and their children. I heard phrases like, "David is getting married to that German girl from Africa." They were thrilled about our engagement, and especially that I was pregnant. I told the publisher I would take a break, but work from home on the book and videos as much as possible. At the ultrasound, we got surprising news. The doctor ran a wand over my abdomen to find the heartbeat. David stared at the monitor, and I saw a smile on his face, signaling all was well. The doctor made some buzzing noises and let us hear the heartbeat, but then I heard David say, "Oh wow," which surprised me. The machine made rapid heartbeat sounds. David looked at me. "We're having twins." The doctor smiled and I cried. I got the last words. Shortly after moving to America, I was shopping for children's furniture at IKEA with my sister-in-law, Marcy. A woman was staring at Marcy, clearly recognizing her. Marcy turned and spoke to her. "Hi, Diane." That was it. No pleasantries. I knew who Diane was, but had never seen her. She was David's ex-wife, the one who had an affair until David found out. "Hey, Marcy, how's it going?" Diane said. I turned, showing my very pregnant belly. Diane was quite pretty. Marcy introduced me pointedly.
"Diane, this is Emma, David's wife."
"We're shopping for baby furniture. She's having twins." Marcy took my hand and we walked away. Under her breath, Marcy muttered, "Strumpet." We picked up our purchases, loaded them into the truck, and had a snack. Marcy filled me in on Diane's story, much of which I already knew. But it was helpful to hear it from her perspective. David's family never talked about Diane. She was old news, best forgotten. That night, when David came home, we made love. Being with him always has the same effect. I dreamed of us riding motorcycles and traveling. While that might not happen soon, David's parents offered their motorhome for trips with the little ones. The motorcycles might gather dust for now, but I'll think about it. It could be fun.